Hello, and welcome to the Child Neurology Foundation's 2021 Patient Advocacy Summit. We are happy that you are here with us. My name is Jessica Nickrand, and I support programs related to the transitions of care at Child Neurology Foundation. I will be moderating this panel called The Power of Storytelling, Advocating for Better Care as a Nonverbal Young Adult. This is our inaugural Transition of Care Patient Advocacy Summit, and we believe that the patient voice and experience is an integral part of a successful transition from pediatric to adult care. This summit focuses on centering those voices and experiences, ensuring that these young adults and those who support them have the knowledge, tools, and confidence to be able to make the process successful. In addition to the summit, CNF offers other resources in the transition of care space, including a toolkit for young adults, their caregivers, and their clinicians and healthcare providers to begin and encourage the many discussions required for successful transfer to adult care, which is also available in Spanish. This and our other resources and transitions of care are available at childneurologyfoundation.org/transitions. These resources and our summit would be impossible without our partners. We are able to put on summits like these for free today, thanks to the generous support from our partners in transitions of care, Acadia, Biogen, Eisai, Genentech, Greenwich, and Zogenix. Thank you. And we hope that if this session resonates with you, and if you learn something new, that you find it helpful in advocating for yourself. And if you are able, that you think about making a donation to the Child Neurology Foundation. It would be so helpful in continuing our efforts to provide first-class programming and education like the summit to the entire child neurology community. Even $5 helps. So if you're interested and able to make a contribution, you can find out more online at childneurologyfoundation.org/donate/online. For that, we would be so grateful. All right, on to this panel. I'm thrilled to introduce you to our three esteemed panelists. Teresa Bartolotta, PhD, CCC, SLP, is the mother of a 31-year-old woman with Rett Syndrome. Teresa is also an academic faculty member, researcher, consultant, and pediatric speech-language pathologist. In her work, she specializes in complex communication disorders, including autism, Down syndrome, and Rett syndrome. She holds a PhD in health sciences from Seton Hall University. She sits on the program for research and support for Rett Syndrome Advisory Board at Monmouth University in New Jersey, provides clinical services at Tender Ones Therapy Services in Dacula, Georgia, teaches graduate courses, and is one of the co-authors of the recently released Rett Syndrome Communications Guidelines published by the International Rett Syndrome Foundation. Welcome, Teresa. Lisa Everett became immersed in the world of accessible needs upon her daughter's diagnosis of Rett syndrome in the year 2000. Her daughter is now 23, and Lisa lives with her family in Minnesota. She has served on the board of directors for the Midwest Rett Syndrome Foundation since its inception in 2002. The MRSF's mission is to educate and support families while funding Rett syndrome research. Lisa holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, Human Resources, and worked professionally until her daughter's graduation from high school. She left the working world to dedicate her time to establishing a new life of opportunity for her adult daughter. Lisa knew that independent living, gaining job skills, or exploring post-secondary education were not the right focus areas post-high school. Rather, she considered her daughter's interests and strengths and began looking at experiences rather than tasks being the priority. Welcome, Lisa. Our last panelist is Suzanne Oberholster, and she is the mother to her daughter, Anna, who is 24 years old. Anna was diagnosed with Rett syndrome when she was 2 years old, just a few months after the gene that causes most cases of Rett syndrome was discovered. Suzanne and her family live in Hoover, Alabama, and feel blessed to be so close to Dr. Percy and his outstanding group at the Rett Clinic in Birmingham. Suzanne was a founding member of the Southeastern Rett Syndrome Alliance, where they held an annual conference in Birmingham for 10 years. Her main focus now is finding accessible trails and boardwalks that allow her daughter, Anna, to enjoy the great outdoors, while she and her husband indulge their love for bird watching and native plants. To share in their journey, check out their Facebook page named Anna's Wheelchair Adventures. Welcome to you all. And now I appreciate you all being here to share your stories and your family's stories. And we're going to start with Teresa sharing her story. Teresa would like to begin her portion this evening by sharing a video of her daughter, Lisa. I'll do that now and then hand it to Teresa to share her story.
Hey, Lisa. Hi. Hey, hi. Are you looking at your iPad? Oh, Lisa, do you want to watch a movie? You do. What movie do you want? I know you're excited. Are you going to pick a movie? You are. Okay. You know what? Why don't you use your hand? Use your hand. There you go. Pick a movie. Ah. Well, there you go. You did it. Good job, Lise.
All right. Thanks so much, Teresa. Would you share your story with us?
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. I wanted to show that brief clip of Lisa because, like many individuals with Rett syndrome, Lisa is nonverbal and she is unable to speak. But as I think you can see in that video, Lisa is completely capable of communicating using other methods. So she uses her voice, her body movements, her facial expression, and with prompting, she is able to do quite a lot. So for example, she was just able to pick a video and turn it on. And I think you might also notice that she needs a little extra time to process and to produce a response. And that's very typical of individuals with Rett syndrome. But I think it shows how interactive and social my daughter is. And in that way, she's very typical of so many of our loved ones with Rett syndrome. Lisa was diagnosed with Rett syndrome when she was 11, but we did know that she had developmental disabilities just around her first birthday. Lisa continues to be fully dependent for all of her activities of daily living as an adult. So she needs constant supervision. She can never be left alone, and she must have all of her needs taken care of for her. And what we've been able to do throughout her life is build a network of individuals to help us, and that includes her special education team, her medical team, and now as an adult, some of the individuals she works with at her day program, and also a caregiver we have here in the home. Lisa started in special education when she was 3, and she continued in special ed until she was 21 when she transitioned to adult care. By the time she was 18, we had built a very trusted team of medical professionals in our home state of New Jersey, which is where we lived up until 2 years ago. What I learned as Lisa turned 18 is that we would have to transition from those pediatric specialists to adult medical professionals in order to continue to provide the appropriate amount of care for her. And I found as a parent that that was quite a traumatic experience, probably harder for me than it was for Lisa. We had to leave our very trusted pediatric neurologist and find a new adult neurologist who actually had not treated anyone with Rett syndrome in recent years and did not have a lot of experience with individuals like Lisa. Likewise, we had to find a new pediatric dentist, a new primary care physician. We had to find a new otolaryngologist. And for me as a parent, the transition from that very trusted team to a new team was very challenging and surprisingly, completely unanticipated. So I found that for some of the physicians, I was just told at her visit around her 18th birthday, okay, thank you very much. It's been wonderful, but we can't see her anymore. And reflecting back, it really would have helped our family a great deal if we had been prepared that this transition was coming, which I completely understood intellectually because of specialization. But if we had been given supports to understand that this was something that was coming, it would have helped our family a great deal more. Lisa transitioned fairly seamlessly to adult care, both from a medical and educational standpoint. She stayed in special education until she was 21 and then transitioned to an adult day program. Now, that kind of transition for families can be quite scary. For many of us, our children have been in the same schools with the same team for years. They have education plans that follow them year after year. And we learn to feel very comfortable sending our nonverbal, very vulnerable children off to school every day. But as we begin to transition to adult care, we have to learn a whole new language. First of all, funding sources change. Federal laws require special education through age 21 for every child with special needs in our entire country. But once you turn 21, the states take over and the funding source becomes Medicaid. And the way states interpret these provisions and how they're going to provide services varies greatly. And so for us as a family, transitioning to adult care was very scary. Now, what was also happening for us is that I was also trying to figure out how we would negotiate this new schedule of Lisa's, because I've always been a full-time working mother, as many women are in our country. The two-parent working family is very commonplace today. And I think we all are aware of the challenges that working mothers have with finding childcare for their children. But here's where we differ when we have children with special needs. First of all, our children with special needs need care for a far prolonged time other than typically developing children. My daughter at 31 still needs to be supervised all the time, including when her day programs ends at 2 p.m. My full-time job continues far longer than that, as do the jobs of many other working women in our country. Finding childcare for your child with special needs is so challenging. Most daycare centers will not take children who have special needs like our daughters and sons. Some boys have Rett syndrome, as the children with Rett syndrome and other individuals with severe developmental disabilities. So what I found is that I was one of the few women who I knew who had a child with special needs who was able to work. Many women have not been. And the implications for their families, for economics, for retirement, for long-term planning to keep their child safe are extraordinary. And so we really are in need of additional supports for us to help our families stay financially strong so that we can continue to provide the supports to our adult children as they move into the later part of their lives. So our transition to adult care actually worked out fairly well. We found that we had a lot of supports and we understood the New Jersey system, and she actually lost no time between moving from special education to her adult day program. What we started to talk about a few years ago was what was going to happen to us and what happened to Lisa as we got older. My husband is now 70. I'm in my early 60s. The time of when we are not going to be able to care for her is coming, and we really have to support her and help her by really having these difficult conversations with our family and also with the professionals who work with our family. We all need to begin to talk about this, and it will help Lisa as well as the rest of us. So for us, what we learned is that we had to move. We had to leave our state of New Jersey, and we had to move 800 miles away to go to Georgia, which is where our son, we have a son who is 3 years older than Lisa, where he is now living with his family. And we also have extended family here. So it was very disruptive for us to move. And if you think about it, it affected my career, it affected my husband, it affected Lisa. She left a program that she had been with since she was 3. But for long-term planning, we wanted to do it while we were still well. And I think that's something that is a really important thing for families if they can do that. So we did. We bought a home in Georgia and we moved 2 years ago. And what we tried to do is we tried to have as seamless a transition as we could for Lisa to the state level adult services. And what I found, to my dismay, is that it was extraordinary challenging experience. The state of Georgia would not accept Lisa's application for adult services until she was a full-time resident in Georgia, no longer living in New Jersey, even though we had already purchased a home here. And they wouldn't even accept it to consider it for once we moved. So that meant there was going to definitely be a disruption in service. What it actually happened is it took 12 months of almost constant work from me to get her services here in Georgia. And what I have learned, to my horror since then, is that is an extraordinarily short amount of time. And what I can tell you is that as a working mother, I still had to find care for her so that I could work while we were getting her adult services provided. So we had to find and pay for private caregiving for her so that I was able to work to care for our family. And the burden on our family was extraordinary. And the paperwork was also so duplicative. Lisa has lived in the United States her entire life, but it was as if we had to recreate a brand new record for her in Georgia. She actually had to go have a psychological evaluation looking at all of her developmental areas while we had thousands of pages of fully verified assessments from age 1 demonstrating her level of need. I am a healthcare professional. I've been working with people with developmental disabilities my whole career. I know that I had an extraordinary benefit of having some inside knowledge of the system so that I could help my daughter and advocate for her. And all through this process, I've thought about what a disadvantage other families who are not specialists in healthcare, who don't understand that lingo, about the burdens that they have to bear to persist for their family and their family member. And I will tell you, many times I just wanted to give up, but I knew that I had to get her into the system so that she would be protected. And fortunately, she now is. She has a budget. She has access to a day program. We all know this has been the most extraordinary year that we have lived through. So Lisa is still, unfortunately, home every day, not back to her day program, but we are hoping that that changes very, very soon.
Thank you so much for that, Teresa. That's a really powerful story, and I'm sure so many families can relate to both the good and the bad parts of that story. And so I look forward to following up on some of those points. But before we do, I'd like to ask Lisa if you would share your family story with us.
Yes. So thank you for having me speak today. I'm very happy to have been able to participate. And I'm really, really glad Teresa went first. She did an excellent job. I have lots of similarities, but I have a lot more differences. So I think our stories will now be quite different and helpful, I hope, to the audience. She did a wonderful job, especially by using the video to give a little insight about Rett syndrome. We live up in Minnesota, you said earlier. I bring that up because that just becomes an interesting piece, because all three of us moms on this call live in different states, and I'm sure we all have different stories of benefits and services and access and all of that. So with my daughter, just for a point of reference, so she's 23. We've been out of high school for 5 years. And Rett syndrome for her, of course, has impacted the gross motor, the fine motor, the speech. And so it has left her nonverbal. It's taken away the fine motor skills, which means she's not able to type or write or learn sign language. We've had little to no success with that adaptive communication, low tech, high tech. So I was really cool to see what Lisa could do in that video. That, just as a point of reference, again, that's something my daughter does not have, that fine motor skill to make choices like that, or the intent for that matter. She is able to walk with assistance. Many girls can't, most can't. So we're very happy that she's still walking. And she has uncontrolled seizures. So that becomes a huge part of what we manage in her day-to-day needs. And of course, 24/7 care cannot be left alone. That's kind of standard, I think, with Rett syndrome. So what I want to jump in, and I didn't have in my notes, but I want to make a point, is it's heartbreaking to hear Teresa talk about her transition from pediatric medical care to adult medical care, and those unfortunate things that happen. We have a beautiful system here in Minnesota, and I take it for granted, I know. Our foundation helped immensely get the Rett Syndrome Clinic going at Gillette Children's in St. Paul. But aside from Rett, they have a lifetime clinic. And so all patients that they're treating are able to transition to adult care, including now our world of Rett syndrome. So thankfully, I've had pretty easy transition over those years of going from 18 and beyond medically and doctoring and things, but it's the rest of the story where now I'll differ. I just think our stories are so complementary because I'm that working professional that had to quit because the day program was not going to work. So that's the story I want to tell. And touching again, Teresa, you mentioned that federally, that transition planning is set at the federal level and done through your schools at the IEP meetings around age 14. And they focus in 5 areas. Well, by age 14 and certainly all through high school, those 5 areas, I knew what was on our radar and what was not on our radar. And so those 5 things, one being independent living, not on our radar. Many families it is, but not on ours. Jobs and vocational training is the second area, not on my radar. And post-secondary college or vocational training, again, not on our radar. So that leaves us with number 4 is rec and leisure. And I say, hey, now we're talking, I can work with that one. And then the last one is community participation. And that's another one we work with. So 3 of those 5 do not fit our world. And yet you're still expected in the federal eyes and your IEP situation to focus and at least address those areas. But it was just not going to be important for us. So there begins our journey. As we look at Jill's high school years, again, I was working full time. We were that 2-income family, like Teresa said. I carried the benefits. At the time when Jill was diagnosed, we were fortunate in Minnesota. We have a waiver program that's attached under Medicaid. She's been on a waiver program and using what we call medical assistance or Medicaid for 21 years now. That program has its ups and downs and different budgets and everything else. That's its own nightmare, honestly. And you have to keep tabs on it at all times. But in the end, it's been invaluable and a huge positive to keeping Jill successful and safe by having access to those services. And I don't want to move 800 miles away like Teresa and go through a nightmare. I hear that so many times. It's so disheartening what families have to go through. And if I could say, us little world of Rett syndrome, and I'm sure other disorders can say the same, but it becomes very obvious of how dysfunctional the United States of America is when we have all of our friends at all different ages and abilities just within Rett that see this. We can't move. We can't take extended vacations. We can't do things that should just be easy for what Teresa said earlier. So that's an interesting issue that still needs addressing. So while I was working and getting ready for transition, I always assumed Jill would attend one of those adult day programs. And there's where the comfort was in those early years of transition. That meant that I would be able to work full time because I didn't know anything else. Well, the final 2 years of high school were really the eye opener for me. And that's when things started changing. So within those final 2 years, within my job, I was promoted to vice president, woohoo. But with that became a lot more stress in the job. Jill becomes harder, not easier as she ages. And so caring for her and that promotion and all of that, my anxiety, my health, all of those things escalated and I became a mess to the point that after long discussion with my husband, we agreed I had to leave that position. And I did. So after taking a few months off, I still needed to work, of course, because I'm going to work and Jill's going to go to a day program, right? That's the grand plan. I actually took a leadership job at the day program that I intended to send her to. And so I had a complete change from the corporate world, and I jumped into working at the day program itself. And it was awesome. I was on cloud nine, and it was a refreshing start for me. So I started that right as she was ending her junior year, beginning senior year. And what I learned in that little over a year working at that program was very invaluable, but it was both in positive and negative ways. A big part of the job that I was hired to do is we had job coaches that were working on a new emerging program that you would work with an adult with challenges to find their own job. And the tradition, at least here in Minnesota, is things called work crews or enclaves, where it's 3 people and 1 job coach and going to jobs. But this was something emerging and is still being pushed today in our state, something called Employment First. And that's what our department was working on. And so because I was so entrenched in that, and again, working with people with an array of abilities and interests, it opened my eyes to where volunteering started to fit to build job skills. And so that was one of the positives for me, as I truly would help coordinate directly or at least oversee these opportunities, like cleaning and organizing tasks at churches, assisting with tasks at a dog kennel because the person had interest in pets. We did mail prep work at our art center. We had people helping with the daycare center at our local YMCA, things like that. And so what it told me is that volunteering can mean job skills, and volunteering can give you flexible hours. For the most part, you can't get fired either because you're just a volunteer. And volunteering gives you that chance to customize duties to fit the person that you're trying to benefit. Now, aside from the world of Rett syndrome, but for those folks that we were serving at that program that had definite abilities to work with, what was shocking, and I say that to people on this call that might be listening, what was shocking to those parents that I'd have to meet with is how different high school is, that fills a full day, 5 days a week. And you get to a program like ours, and you're trying to use our coaches to find your young adult a job and build skills. But we might only fill 4 to 8 hours a day, or for the week, 4 to 8 hours in a week, rather than how school was filling full days, 5 days a week. So I just want to throw that out as that was another interesting learning point for me as a parent. I worked there, but I always had my parent hat on. Is that cliff that comes? I don't know how many times I was told that the cliff of ending high school, you get pushed off. So I saw that happening more and more to families that we were serving. So that were some of the positives coming out of that day program. But the harsh reality of what it takes to run a program for people of all ages, 18 to 68, all interests, all ages, all abilities, when you see the inner workings from the leadership level and behind the scenes, my plan for Jill attending that program halted real fast. So what that left me with was another scratch my head. What am I going to do? Because I'm still working and carrying benefits and a paycheck and all that. So what I found, and again, this is just our area. I live in a small town, southern Minnesota, 25,000 people. Options are options. They're not aplenty. But that program and the others that I toured in our area, with Jill's vulnerabilities, her complex medical needs, it was not going to be a mix when you had the high staff turnover. You had the lack of competent staff to be one-on-one for her. I was accustomed to one-on-one aides in the school. One-on-one competent care in a day program is non-existent in our area. That was not acceptable to me. And further, watching firsthand and even experiencing being injured myself, but clients hurting other clients, because you're mixing people now with my sweet little Jill that cannot literally harm you, really. I mean, not in the ways that you now have 55-year-old men that are capable of pinching and hair pulling and biting and pushing and punching. And the unsanitary habits of people and I mean, I just was overwhelmed at those challenges. And really what that meant was inadequate options for her and the safety risks and all of that. So the good and the bad, I want to share that because that was just such a harsh reality to me because I worked there. And then I was left with now what? I've already quit my corporate job. Now I'm quitting this program at the day program. And I did that just months before she graduated high school. And so going back to the benefit of having that waiver program and her on Medicaid, I'm able to access what's called paid parent. And so I at least can supplement the lost paycheck from quitting. I can't supplement the lost benefits. So as I completely left the workforce, my husband left his job of 21 years because he didn't have benefits in the small employer he worked for all those years. He had to quit, go find those benefits to support him and I. So we both had major changes. They are working out. But here was the new normal now, truly post high school, because now she's done with high school. And yes, we have that 18 to 21 program. So now I'm not working at all, and I could actually go to the program, train the staff, watch what they did. Our program was new and emerging because at the time it was merging with 2 other communities. So lots of new things going on. But again, very job skill oriented. They wanted to help you fill out job applications, learn tasks, and get jobs. Not a fit for Jill, not our goals. So you were kind of always brushed to the side. And so as time went on, where I started to focus was the value of her social opportunities and the value of continuing her walking and keeping her mobility. And so as we ended the 18 to 21 program, we probably only did that a few months. Then I started trying to create our own programs. And so things that I tried and some we're still doing, we have a walking track at our YMCA, so it's indoors. They can sell you just a track pass rather than a full membership. It's a way to meet new people, some her age, some younger, some older. But that was something that met kind of that social and that physical needs that I wanted to work on. I started my own thing called Happy Hour with Jill, where I invited her past other graduating friends and their parents that I knew so they could have transportation. They went to our local pizza place. It was beautiful because it was our chance to stay with age appropriate peers. It was our ability to have flexibility. Some weeks we canceled, some weeks we didn't. And of course, by picking the pizza place, we had chicken wings and lemonade and all Jill's favorite things. So that was a good fit. We have our Special Olympics in town. And so that has been a huge part of her life too. But what I like about it is we pick the sports that can fit her abilities. We can go when it works. We can cancel when she's having a bad day. And we've had wonderful friendships, and she's always kind of the light of the day for other people greeting her and things. So that's been a positive for her. And then we started exploring volunteering at Milestone Assisted Living. That has been probably our #1 best success story in terms of the social, the physical, the acceptance, the safety, the year-round, the indoor safe place, the welcoming, the kindness, all of that. So that has been a wonderful piece for us. And as all of these years have gone on, what I find is while I tried at first to look at tasks and jobs and different things, just because that's what you felt you had to do, by taking a step back, I looked at where she's happiest is experiences. And so as we went into year 3 and 4, I started fitting more things about experiences. And along the way, of course, there's always that challenge of having staff hired, staff trained. I can't do it all. I will burn out real fast. So that continues and always will be a challenge. But so far, going into year 5 now, we're in a good place. And you know, we got to that 4th year out of high school, and everything finally gelled. And then COVID hit, and I had to cancel my best summer ever. I had the best staff, the best schedule, and it all had to go completely to zero. So what we're slowly working on, so a happy place to be today, is that I can start bringing some of that back. And so she's had a personal trainer pre-COVID, so we're bringing that back. We've got music therapy that we haven't brought back yet, but that had been some success for her. We finally, for 2 weeks now, we've been allowed to come back to the building for the assisted living facility and do her walking. And I do a personal massage therapist, and the stretching and things that comes into the home as well. So we're bringing those things back. Where we are today, I don't want to give the impression that I'm against day programs as a whole, but I have people that I know in the metro area, they love their programs, but for what we have here, it was not going to be acceptable to me. But what I also learned is that when you can find value in carving out opportunities within opportunities that works for your child, and so you're just customizing, and that is one of those positives I learned from working at the day program. So as an example, our personal trainer, when we first started with her at the local gym, a normal fee structure for a personal trainer was for an hour, but I knew Jill would never last an hour. Well, they were willing to work with me and just do a half an hour. We bill accordingly, and it all works. I help build the program, the routines. I stay there in case she has seizures. And we've been doing that a whole year, then COVID, but now we're bringing it back. Another example of carving out and customizing is that assisted living facility. Something that I started on just for a month was of this walking program, was a New Year's resolution kind of thing that we started. But we've been doing it for almost 2 years. It was a huge success, and the people that live there love her to pieces, and it's the highlight of their week when they know she's coming. But what we've done with that is, as I've gotten to know that setting, and as they've gotten to know us, we've started bringing in adapted games, adaptive crafts. We capitalize on their social time, because where her ability is kind of where their ability is. And so it's been a beautiful fit that way, that it can be slow paced, simple, but that bonding and social that happens is really cool. And then other things that we dabbled in is we found a hobby farm through a friend, and they had a new pony, and Jill instantly bonded with the pony. And honestly, that pony is intended to be trained to help children with literacy. And so I'm excited to have it exposed to Jill, so that maybe it helps accustom to young people, wheelchairs, etc. The other beauty of coordinating our own life now post high school is Jill loves her swinging. She loves her trail walking. I want to hear more about Suzanne's world of the trails and things. We just did both of those today, twice. We have time to fit that in, and that's something that she appreciates, especially in the summer months. And within that, the parks and the trails, I've served on the city's park committee, and they're listening to me as a voice for people with special needs, and they are reacting and adapting. We finally actually have the first swing in the history of our town that Jill can use as a special needs person, that's not surrounded by wood chips and gravel and all those good things. So they are listening, and that's coming along. So wrapping up, I just want to say, it's been an interesting 5 years. I do think Jill feels engaged. I think she feels satisfied living here and having us direct her programs. And I think that because I did see it backslide and a little bit of depression during that COVID spell, I did start to see that in her. So now we're coming back out of that. Routines are coming back a little bit. We have to tweak it. The sad side is we lost some of the residents at the assisted living died due to COVID. That's been extremely hard for us. And the others, we lost a year that was more aging. Their abilities have changed. So we're watching those negatives right now, but we're back. We're excited. I have wonderful staff helping me at the home right now, and life is full of change, but my ears and eyes are always open. It's an evolving process, and life will just evolve. And so that's what I've learned, and that's where we're at, and it's never done. Work in progress, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much for sharing that, Lisa. And yeah, work in progress in so many ways for all of us. Suzanne, will you share your family story with us,
Oh,
please?
sure. Well, Anna aged out of public school, when she was 21, just like so many of other special needs children. And at that time, I had a part-time job teaching biology at a local university. And I had to quit my job because in Alabama, we have Medicaid waivers like all states do, but the only waiver that Anna, well, the one that she was on at the time was the END waiver, the elderly and disabled waiver. And there are very few slots of the ID waiver, which is administered by mental health. And that was the waiver that you need in order to get any kind of day program. So Anna doesn't have any kind of day program. She's just still on the END waiver. Now, from what I understand, they are opening up more slots on the ID waiver. And but other mothers have talked to that program, and in some ways it may just be a way of saying that they've eliminated that waiting list of the ID waivers. So I haven't, I meant to call them before we went on this trip, but I didn't get a chance to. So I don't know exactly what that ID waiver is going to be able to provide for Anna, if it's a day program, or I sort of doubt it, unfortunately. So, I mean, really Anna's journey and her story is very similar to Teresa and Lisa's daughter, but Anna is confined to a wheelchair. She cannot walk. She's never been able to walk. And she doesn't have good fine motor skills at all. And so, everything that we try to do is something that she'll have to enjoy, being confined to her wheelchair. So what we've done is, since I quit my job, I mean, like Lisa, just trying to find community activities that Anna would enjoy. So Anna likes the spectacle. That's what I always say about Anna. So she loves football games, for example. And luckily in Hoover, they have we're in Alabama, so, football's king. So we would go to the football games every Friday night. And luckily the wheelchair section was right next to the band. And she loved the band and all the ladies, all the majorettes and their sparkly outfits. And but of course, all that came crashing down once COVID hit. So we missed a whole football season. And so Anna's now 24, and I really feel like we were just hitting our stride with, finding some activities to do, going to the zoo, going to the football games, being out in the community. And of course, then COVID hit and it hit everybody. So it's not like we're special, but I feel like in a way we're just now, restarting everything again and having to find all those activities and everything. Now, one thing that the Hoover City just recently installed an accessible playground. And I was real excited about that because Anna is in a wheelchair. I thought that there would be some things in that accessible playground that she could access, and, maybe some little things that I could wheel her up in her wheelchair and they'd rock back and forth. There would be wheelchair swings and that kind of thing. But unfortunately, there were no wheelchair swings when I got down to the park. I was very disappointed in that. And, talked to them about that. And they said that, well, the wheelchair swings, unfortunately, and I kind of get this, can kind of be like a missile. You can't really put them around other kids. They have to be within a gate or something like that because they're usually metal. So that was like a huge disappointment because Anna does like to swing. And so it's just, it's things like that that are very disappointing. For example, we'll try to go walk at a park and maybe at a track, and a lot of times the gate will be locked, because if they don't lock the gate, then people will go in there with their four-wheelers and that kind of thing, and do donuts. And so there's just a lot of restrictions if your child is in a wheelchair 24/7 like Anna is. So my husband and I have well, he's an ecologist and I'm a botanist. So, we're the people that you don't want to live next door to because our yard is going to be full of what most people think of as weeds. But anyway, so what we've just tried to do is just find any boardwalk, any accessible trail that we can in and around the Hoover area and in Birmingham or just wherever we happen to be. And that's why I started Anna's Wheelchair Adventures on Facebook. It's just a page, but it makes me feel like maybe other people can get some ideas about places that they can go to take their child or their person in a wheelchair to get some outdoor and some nature time. Because on this trip, we've been through Colorado and now we're in New Mexico. We were on a trail in Colorado that had just a little spur of a bird trail, and the wind was blowing and the leaves were rustling, and Anna, I just noticed she was looking up and smiling. I mean, she just loves to watch leaves rustle, and it's just little things like that. If we can just provide little things like that for Anna, she's really a pretty happy child most of the time. Well, she's not a child anymore, she's really a young lady. But it's that kind of thing that really enhances her life. And so even though we are in Alabama, and Alabama is always 49th or 50th on the list for everything bad, and never at the top of the list for anything good, we just have to just keep going and find things that she likes to do. And so that's basically what I try to do, is just to find things that she enjoys doing.
Thanks so much for that, Suzanne. A question that I have for all three of you is, obviously your daughters all have Rett syndrome, but listening to you all, of course, they all have different needs and different interests and different abilities. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about how you educate, people who might be teachers or medical providers or people who run some of these activities that you're or support some of these activities that you're talking about. How do you share your daughter's needs with people like that in your community in a way that ensures that your daughter gets to live the kind of life that they want to?
Well, I can start by saying when Lisa was probably turning 18, one of the things I had heard about was kind of making up a communication passport, kind of like a little journal, talking about everything that Lisa can do and what when Lisa does something, what it means. And so I think that's been really helpful in educating a new day program, educating her new caregivers, because we've been very fortunate to find caregivers in our community who we can trust and bring into our home to take care of her. But what they do need that special individualized information. I think somebody said, there's similarities, but every person with Rett syndrome is different. And what's known about Rett syndrome is such a rare disorder that what's known about it is very limited. Many professionals might see one or two cases. And the older literature especially is very bleak. When we were looking for Lisa's diagnosis, a very prominent neurologist said to me, when I mentioned, could she have Rett syndrome? He said, you don't want her to have Rett syndrome. All the girls with Rett syndrome lose their ability to walk, and they almost all die before they're 20. Now that's kind of old information, but that really wasn't that long ago. So educating beyond the label is really important.
I look at, I was thinking of the different places in our community that we've attempted to volunteer or participate in activities since graduation. And so for me, it's, doing what I can to research online or a brochure or something, but then I start asking specific questions of a program leader or a director with the idea of how is this best going to fit for Jill. And then I explore it with or without Jill. We take a tour. And then I start small. And so I think of our YMCA, the walking track. That's exactly how that began, is it was brand new built, new to everybody. I happened to be friends with the director. And so I was able to ask those questions, take the tour, and start small. And it was on our schedule, in terms of she's having a bad day. She made it a half a lap. We're out of here. To be honest, one thing I learned is it was hit and miss with the little kids that they had for like summer camps and things. Sometimes she's fascinated and fine, and other times they're too loud and they make her cry and we leave. So starting small, exploring. And what I found now that she's out of high school, I don't have to do so much informing like they're going to be giving her care. Instead, we get our feet wet and we start participating in some fashion or attending. And just by us being there naturally has brought about interest and questions about her. And it lets us just start a conversation. And then it weaves from there. That's how I saw the assisted living blossom, the YMCA, even our time at Carboni's, the pizza place. We got to know the waitress and things like that. And so you just tweak along the way, to ask for tables that don't have to be at the back of the room because I've got the wheelchair, and we don't stay that long. I don't have to worry about a bathroom, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what some of the things I've done.
Yeah, I agree with Lisa. Now that can y'all hear me? Yeah. Now that Anna is out of school, and I'm her primary caregiver, except for her respite care worker, whom Anna loves, by the way. The main thing that I have to do is just, if people are curious about her in the community, talk to them about Rett syndrome if they ask a question. Or a lot of times people with little kids, the little kids will, want to stare at Anna, and the parents are like, no, don't stare. And sometimes, depending on my mood, I'll say, listen, it's fine. And I'll talk a little bit about Rett syndrome. But the main person that I've had to address recently would be her primary care physician, because we did have to move from her pediatrician to an adult doctor. And but I found that most of them are very good. I can't really complain about the medical care that Anna gets, because her neurologist is Dr. Percy, and I think everybody in the Rett community knows who Dr. Percy is. And now it's going to be Dr. Anant, who is gradually going to, I guess, to assume take over that Rett clinic in Birmingham. But it's just little things. Just if she makes a particular sound and they want to know what that is, sometimes I know and sometimes I don't. So I'll just talk to them about that.
Something that came through really clearly in all three of your stories is the importance for community, both for your daughters, but it seems like also maybe for yourselves. And, you've all had some moves, you've all had some changes. I'm wondering if you could talk about, for those parents and families that might be watching this right now who think to themselves, well, I don't think there's anyone in my local community that has Rett syndrome or anything similar, but I'd like the community like this. How do you suggest those families start finding the necessary community to create the thriving environment the three of you have been able to create for your family?
Now, when you say community, we have our Rett community, and then we have our traditional community we just live in. So which community?
I think both.
Well, and so I would think of community in several ways then. So obviously us three on this call, we all have our Rett community, and that might be within our state, but all across the country and even the world. And it's been easy for us to connect because we have such a strong connector in the National Foundation. and then speaking for our Midwest area and the foundation I'm involved in. So that's easy to connect to your Rett community. And so obviously searching online, if you have a different disorder for your child, there's likely something out there. But a different way I think of it is, you know, put aside Rett, I think of the special needs community, and what's been super positive in all ways for us is the Special Olympics connection that we have in our town. And so that is its own community and had its spin off from high school friends, and blossomed into lots of other friends because of the offerings through Special Olympics. And then another community that's been very valuable is just the good old fashioned community that we live in. And so I have a small rural town, really 25,000 people roughly. We're a good hour from the metropolitan area. So that stuff is not something I access regularly. So my background in all my working years has been very involved in community events and our Chamber of Commerce and all of those things. So I had a natural link in a very good way to pull when it was time for Jill to blossom and benefit from my community connections. I knew people, or I knew who to call somebody, you know, pulling strings basically. So that community has been very helpful, and small and doable, but small can work against you too. And that means less access to other opportunities and events and culture and different things too. It can be less of that and less options. Sometimes it's the staffing thing too, that we have less people to pull from. So it's good and bad, but that's the community, how I would answer that.
Well, oops, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right.
Suzanne and Lisa, would you mind muting yourselves? Because I'm thinking what we're picking up is Teresa's echo through your speakers.
Okay. So when Lisa was young, and she got her diagnosis, finding the Rett syndrome community was really a lifesaver for us, because we could interact with families that were going through similar situations. And then also it helped us as we looked ahead to try to predict, you know, what some of the things that could happen to her: scoliosis, surgery, seizures, things like that. I found this wonderful community of support just for the disability. Moving now so many miles away to a brand new community, I think I can tell in myself how much I've grown in terms of my willingness to share our story and to talk very openly about Lisa. So when we moved in to our neighborhood, I just spoke very openly about her. And, you know, I don't know anyone else who lives in our community who has an adult child with a disability, but my fears of being judged were so unfounded. We've been welcomed with open arms. And in a way, Lisa stands out as she walks around our neighborhood. She can walk with our caregiver, if I take her for a walk on the weekend. And it's amazing how people are drawn to her because we've been open to sharing without fear of judgment about Lisa, and let people know how open we are to talking about her and talking about her challenges, talking about her interests, her abilities. And I can see that as a younger mother, I was very fearful of being judged or of having her judged negatively. And my instinct was to protect her. And in some ways that was not good for either of us. It's much better to be trusting, because there really are so many good people who want to embrace her. They just don't know. They don't know, but they're willing to listen.
I found that when my boys were young and they were playing sports, one of my sons played baseball at the local rec league, that it was much easier to have community then because we were always at the ballpark and we were around the same people all the time. I think it's to me it's a little bit harder now that she's gotten older. We do go to the ball games and that kind of thing. And, we talk to people that are around us when we're at those events. As far as community, we have, of course, I have my Rett community. And for 10 years, we had the Southeastern Rett Syndrome Alliance, and we had a conference every year in Birmingham. So that kept us we were all pretty tight-knit group then, but we disbanded because the only people who were doing anything were parents who had children with Rett syndrome, and it just got too difficult. I mean, we were all getting older and it was just too much. And so, we tried to get other people involved. We tried to, give duties away to other people, but we just found that, there just wasn't that intense interest. And so we just finally had to give it up. As far as family, my family is in Georgia and Alabama, and I think family is part of community, but my husband's family, they all live in South Africa and Australia. So, we don't really have that family community on my husband's side unless we go visit. And of course it's very expensive and it's a long plane ride to go anywhere like that. So
yeah, absolutely. We're I can't believe how quickly our evening has gone. And so with that, I think I'm going to just ask one more question. And so your daughters are all young adults. They're for the most part on the other side of their transfer and transition to adulthood, both medically, but also it sounds like school and their activities and sort of their day-to-day life. What would you tell a family that is currently working on their child's transition? A family who has a child with Rett syndrome or a similar disorder. Any words of wisdom or things that you wish that you would have known when your daughter was in her teens?
Well, for me, don't make assumptions. I made lots of them that blew up in my face. So planning. And when you think you're really planning, keep planning. As an example for everybody, and it's so common and it's fine when it works, but the day program and taking those tours, the tour is just the tip of the iceberg. Dig deep, talk to other parents, do your homework. But it's exploring what's available. I mean, again, every community is different. Emerging options are always coming. With COVID, some of those options went away, and like Teresa's program, they still aren't back. But when they go back, what's it going to look like? But digging deep, asking questions. Sometimes families, even especially when you are in more metropolitan areas, you cross boundaries, and maybe you're willing to look at options and opportunities 20 miles away, 50 miles away. I wasn't willing to do that. But that planning piece, and then whether it's planning, even when it is vocational and college, there are services, there are overarching laws that help, but don't take things for granted. Dig deep. What is the assistance? What is the cost? Like my example with the day program, it might be just perfect, and then surprise, it only fills 8 hours a week, and you left scrambling to fill the rest. The cliff, I just heard this reference the other day from another parent. The cliff still exists. You're going to get pushed off. You've got to take the reins and plan, and you know what you want for your child. If you're able, get your child's input. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. Plan, and then plan again.
And what I would say, I would agree absolutely with everything Lisa said. And I would say, take copious notes. If you don't understand terms, ask for ask for the explanation. Make sure you understand everything that people are telling you. If you don't, ask. Exhaust all of your potential resources. Fellow parents who've been through it a year or two before you, they're going to be great resources. But just ask, do your research, and then don't give up. If they don't call you back, call them again. Document everything. I do believe that we got some traction here in Georgia because I had a very well documented email trail, and I did reach out to our local assembly person. And I think that's what got me some traction, because I created noise about what she needed. So do not be afraid. You are your child's best advocate, and they are relying on you, and you know them so well. So don't be afraid to call in whatever chips you can, because you also can be helping pave the way for another family.
I definitely agree with that, Teresa, because I do believe that the reason why now in Alabama they are starting to open up more slots on the ID waivers because of parents that have come before me. Like I said, unfortunately, I haven't explored exactly what's on that ID waiver, and I'm going to do that when we get back home. But I do think that it was because of parents saying, listen, there's no day programs, there's no basic, no transition in Alabama. When Anna was going through the transition in school, I was the one who had to insist that she have a transition meeting. And I don't even really think that they knew what transition meant. And I was getting very frustrated with her teacher because, I would have to ask for this transition meeting every year. And then what I learned is that, well, there's really nothing for her to transition to. So I think that was why they didn't really think about transition too much. But definitely in certain states, there is a cliff. I mean, when your child ages out of school, you go right down to the bottom of the cliff. I hope that that's, changing for the better in Alabama. I really do.
Thanks so much to you all. That's going to conclude our panel today, but I feel like we could have just kept talking for hours. And I want to thank our panelists again, Teresa, Lisa, and Suzanne. On behalf of CNF and our communities, we are so grateful that you have shared with us your time and expertise, and we look forward to implementing what we have learned tonight in our own communities. As a reminder, CNF and our partners have more resources and transitions of care available both at childneurologyfoundation.org/transitions and also on the password protected hub where you accessed this talk. We'd like to again thank our partners Acadia, Biogen, Eisai, Genentech, Greenwich, and Zogenix. And we invite you again to help fund our programming if you're able, because the greatest feedback you could give, the greatest gift you could give us if you found the session helpful, is a donation. So if you can, please go to childneurologyfoundation.org/donate-online. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and be sure to check out the rest of the talks available on the Summit website.